Good evening, everyone. My name is John Gray. I am a senior bicycle and pedestrian planner at SRPEDD, Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. I'm joined by my colleague tonight, Maya Kudo, who is our transportation planner here at SRPEDD. We are both working with the town of Mansfield on the development of a bicycle and pedestrian network plan. So, just going over a quick set of the details for tonight. This is in webinar format. There's several of you who are attending tonight. If you want to chime in and offer your thoughts and comments, you can do so by just clicking raise hand at the bottom of your screen, and we will elevate you to a panelist. And then, in addition, you can always feel free to send chat or in the Q&A, and we can also answer questions that way as well. At the end of the meeting or at the end of the slides here, I'll show there'll be a link as well where you can learn more information about the plan, and how to get in contact with us, how to learn more about some of the events that we'll be participating in as this plan goes through the process over the next year and a half or so. So the bicycle and pedestrian network plan, the goal is to improve safety, connectivity, accessibility for pedestrians and cyclists of all ages and abilities across the town. That includes people walking, people biking, scooters, wheelchairs, any sort of micro mobility device. That's all included in sort of the bicycle and pedestrian category. We're gathering data with traffic counters across the town, various locations, to sort of gather data on usage of shared use paths like the rail trail, sidewalks, and other locations. And we're also sort of getting out in the field and just talking to folks who are walking or biking around in Mansfield. And so this work is working on essentially developing a set of existing conditions, and that will inform our summary report that will finalize phase one of this plan. So the summary report will have the data, maps, photos, and some of our initial community input, and that will inform phase two, which will start in the fall and then wrap up next year. So we are planning to have that summary report for phase one around September. And then the following year, the plan would be finalized somewhere between August and September of 2027. So certainly have plenty of time to offer your comments and get in touch with us. Here's a brief kind of timeline over that next sort of year and a half or so. We already have started. We worked with the town uh, director of planning, Sarah Raposa, and we launched a steering committee that is a formal town committee appointed by the select board. We've got 6 members of that committee. There is one vacancy. So if anyone is interested in serving on the committee, feel free to reach out. We also launched an initial webpage for the project, and have begun doing some initial mapping of things like sidewalk gaps, and other kind of infrastructure in the town that is useful for sort of setting that existing conditions. So the steering committee's been formed. We're starting to do some of our initial public engagement. As I said, our summary report is going to be coming out around September. And then kind of going into the fall, and into the winter, we'll be working on sort of drafting sort of a draft network plan. So sort of prioritizing gaps in the network, things like gaps in the sidewalks and, proposed, extensions of the rail trail and sort of identifying any sort of safety issues or concerns that would strengthen the network. Essentially, you might have infrastructure that's there, but there's always room for improvement and making it even safer and more accessible. So we will present the draft concepts to the steering committee and collect additional feedback, sort of going from winter into spring of 2027. We'll have our draft plan by around April to June timeframe, and then we'll have our final plan and presentation to the town by September of 2027. And so, tonight everyone here is a pedestrian. What we also wanted to talk about is bicycling in Mansfield and in the region. And I wanted to share this graphic because I think it's very helpful. It's important to sort of think of bicycle user types, and a lot of people fall into the sort of interested but concerned category. There is a substantial number of people that are not interested in bicycling or are unable to bicycle or bike anywhere due to, not being interested in it or, limitations. But this sort of 60% figure is the general sort of range of the number of people that are interested in, riding their bike, but not fully feeling super comfortable, especially in close proximity to cars. And lots, sort of traffic and speed are important factors for folks riding bikes. And then, 7% of folks are comfortable using bike lanes, but certainly, have a little bit more experience riding bikes or a level of comfort riding next to vehicles. And then typically, we see like a very small percentage, 1, 2% of people are sort of fearless and would ride anywhere. So, in terms of your comments, if you would like to share them tonight, feel free to, let us know what sort of bicycle user type you are, if you're interested in or interested and concerned, or confident, somewhat confident, or highly confident. That would be helpful for us if you want to share that information. Um, these are sort of some photos that we wanted to just share to sort of get those sparks flowing and get some ideas as far as we want to hear anything you have as far as concerns about safety, opportunities to connect, probably the rail trail to something or build additional infrastructure that's sort of like the rail trail, which is called a shared use path, and sort of developing a stronger network. So it's obviously one of the key assets for the town is a World War II Veterans Memorial Trail. The photo on the left is actually Norton, but it's the pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is sort of an interesting piece of infrastructure that some folks love and others don't. But we also wanted to talk about things like wayfinding signage. So we've got this photo here with the trail kiosk at Fruit Street, and then also amenities too, because it's not just about walking and biking, but sometimes it's taking a rest in the shade or stopping to grab a drink or something like that. We also want to talk about, hear your thoughts about downtown, safety concerns, opportunities for better improvement or flow, continuity, connections to the MBTA station or, buses, biking, whether you're sort of wanting to bike on the street or you prefer to ride on the sidewalk. We also want to, talk about roads that might have an opportunity for improved infrastructure. So here's a photo, we took this weekend of, a child that, probably appeared to be about maybe 10 years old, biking down School Street. And they were biking along the sidewalk. And that's, kind of maybe contrary to, some folks' belief. In Massachusetts, you actually can ride on the sidewalk, so it's not against the law. And people certainly feel comfortable riding on the sidewalk because of that separation. Additional roads in, sort of, I think on the far right here, we've got, the industrial park with, wider roads that do have extra space and, in some cases could be, reallocated. But we really want to hear from you all in terms of, priorities and whether that would be useful for you or not. We also have seen this piece of infrastructure, another one that's actually technically in Norton, but part of the rail trail extension. This took North Washington Street and kind of converted it into, essentially a more comfortable walking, biking connection for the rail trail, while still maintaining the same number of vehicle travel lanes. We're also interested in hearing about your experience with trails and recreational areas in Mansfield. We were at the soccer fields off Plymouth Street this weekend and got some great feedback from folks. Obviously, the loop trail around that area is awesome, and I will say one of the comments that we received from one of the mothers at the soccer fields was essentially that, she's got a son that she would love to go, have him ride to his friend's house who's nearby, but there's a sidewalk gap in between their house and the friend's house, and that sort of limits how comfortable she feels letting her son go out for that ride. So it's sort of limiting his ability to be independent, and also takes more of her time to shuttle her children, here or there. And so really, I think a lot of the, comments we'd love to hear about would be stuff like that, and, key roads that might be a little bit, sort of, something that you'd like to see better infrastructure, or infrastructure improvements generally. We're also interested in hearing about accessibility issues. SRPEDD did work with the town of Mansfield on an ADA transition plan, and so some of this plan will be informed by that. But things like missing crosswalks, vegetation overgrowth into sidewalks. And obviously in Mansfield, you've got the railroad running through town, and that, similar to sort of Route 140, it kind of divides the town. And, we're interested in hearing, more about, connectivity across Mansfield. So, for example, if you're in West Mansfield, there is sort of, connections into the town, and they're sort of limited to like West Street or School Street. And we're interested in hearing more about just connectivity overall. And here's our contact information. There's also the web page here at the bottom of the uh, slide here, serpid.org/Mansfield bike ped plan. That'll get you to our project landing page with more information about the plan. There is an opportunity to sign up for email updates if you'd like. There is also we've got a listing of events that we'll be participating in on that page. And then there's also a public comment card. So if you want to, just listen in tonight, that's perfectly fine. No pressure to, go off mute or post a Q&A comment. You can always go to the web page here and submit a comment, or even better, share that link with, your family and friends in Mansfield, and let them share their thoughts and info and comments on, walking, biking in Mansfield, and how, connectivity can be improved, safety can be improved, and other things like that. So that's all I have as far as a presentation for tonight. I'm happy to have folks, raise their hands and offer their comments now. So we're here and ready to listen. I will I'll go through some more of these slides so that it'll jog folks' memory and maybe spur some thoughts as far as comments. Tom, thank you for chiming in. Go right
No
ahead.
problem. John, I just wanted to call out one of the reasons you might not be getting more feedback is chat is disabled. You had mentioned at the top of the
Hmm.
call that people can put their questions in chat.
Let's see.
So want to call that out. And I guess while I'm off mute, I might as well ask a question as to you kind of hinted at the connection for the bike path to other locations. And I think that the most obvious one is to the train station as well as to the potential new road. I think that has been considered that will run along the front of the train station connecting up to North Main Street. And so I know you're still in the early days of planning, but I think that would be a critical component since I know for me as one of the confident bikers in the group, I still prefer to cross the across 106 using the train bridge.
Hmm.
And the lack of connection to the rail trail from there is definitely a gap that would be awesome to close.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. That's great feedback. In terms of, the bridge across, so you're saying basically, right now, in order to sort of get north of downtown, you're sort of using that train bridge. Are you typically using the MBTA station, or are you just trying to get
No,
north of?
just trying to get, well, I do use the MBTA station quite a bit, not as a bicyclist, more just to use the Blue Apple bus. But no, when I'm biking, it's just that I live north of the train station, so to get to downtown, to bike for lunch, or for recreation, that is how I cross 106.
Got it. Yeah, I'm curious, Tom, if if you got thoughts on um, sort of some of the other kind of railroad crossings. I think Copeland Drive, I want to say, was another one that was recently mentioned in our steering committee meetings as being maybe not the most comfortable to get around. I think Copeland Drive sort of seems like it has probably more, room because it is just two lanes, whereas obviously Chauncey Street's a little bit more congested with multi lanes and
Yeah,
elevated
I
sidewalks. So,
frequently do go under that bridge at Copeland. My observation is while it is a wider shoulder, it is incredibly pockmarked with multiple years of unrepaired potholes in the non-travel lanes, right? So all of the shoulders are difficult to traverse on a bike. So what happens is bicyclists are forced out into the road at the bridge under Copeland.
okay, so you're saying right, basically the shoulder on Copeland, as you're sort of going under the bridge, that's
Yeah, I'm just
uneven terrain.
reacting to your question about the train crossing at Copeland. So
Yep.
that, but I think you're referring to the kind of in between where West Street and like the Wendy's is. There's that bridge
Yep.
under the train station. Yeah,
Yep.
and on both sides, the shoulder is much older than the roadway itself, and so it forces bicyclists into the road unless they use the sidewalk. But personally, I don't unless except for the shared bike path, I always bike on the road.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I
Mhm. Yep,
appreciate the feedback, and I believe our Q&A functionality is up and running. If you want to take a look and let us know if it
great.
looks good on your side.
Yep, it does. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
John, if you're not getting questions, am I still off mute? I can still talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead,
I'll
Tom.
just I want to respond to the question from Sally. I think it is about the length of Maple Street. Just since I live on Potash and I go down that length of Maple Street on my bike all the time. It's one of the only two places in Mansfield that I've ever been clipped by a car. There is absolutely no shoulder on there, so I often will cut through Joanne Drive to minimize my time on Maple Street. And it's a missed opportunity, I think, for the town of Mansfield because it does afford, again, good access to the train station as a bicyclist. When I used to take the train to Boston, I used to bike to the train station and leave my bike at the bike locks there and would always take 106 because Maple Street wasn't safe enough. Now I'm a little bit more adventurous and I do go on Maple, but not only an enlarged sidewalk that was called out, but even just having an inch of shoulder along Maple, which it's a shame because it was just repaved about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and there was no widening of the shoulder, and even when in places where it was possible.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. I want to say Maple Street. I believe that might be listed as one of the town's scenic roads. And so Maya and myself are going to look into that a little bit more as far as what kind of implications that has for things like road widening or sidewalks or things like that. So certainly open to hearing any comments you have on that.
Yeah,
But
and
thank you.
just to
Yeah.
pop in too, we've heard Maple Street be brought up a few times, I think, from people. So you guys aren't the only ones to bring up that street in particular. But as John said, it is a scenic road, so we want to do more research about kind of what that entails in terms of um, possible future projects to kind of improve bicycling along there or walking along there.
Sally, I am going to unmute you and feel free to chime in.
Thank you so much. This is so interesting. So you had mentioned 140 as being a divide. Well, truly going from Town Hall to like Staples and so on, that's a bit of a challenge. But if you just go through West Street, go down West Street, and then through this little path, you're at the pedestrian walk light. And if something more could be done there, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, I think West Street, it's a very interesting road because, for someone driving, I think it obviously is kind of disconnected, but for someone walking or biking, as you mentioned, there is that path that sort of comes right off of the side of 140 and kind of connects you over to towards Town Hall, and so I would venture a guess that West Street probably would be a pretty key road on the sort of the overall bicycle and pedestrian network, especially as far as connectivity from West Mansfield into town. So Sally, it sounds like you have used that walkway on sort of the side of 140 before. Do you have any sort of specific feedback as far as how that would make how improve any improvements that would make it more comfortable or general comments on it overall?
I'm going to ask my husband, Willie, who's often on his bicycle in town. Really?
Oh, I have no question.
Oh, he doesn't have a, yeah, I'm sure you could come up with something. But generally, I just try, Willie taught me, just try to find the side roads. And so if people knew more of the side roads to get places instead of 106 and the main roads, that is already better for bicycle safety. And we love Park Street, what happened, that widened sidewalk. And for that to be used, as I mentioned in my comments, to go out to Maple Street Woods, that would be really enhance quality of life for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Park Street. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Certainly, I think Park Street the wide sort of side path that was added onto that definitely improves, connectivity between the rail trail and the schools. And so, in Massachusetts, there's something called the Safe Routes to School program, which works on improving infrastructure for kids walking and biking to schools. And that project is kind of a great example of, I'm not sure it was necessarily funded through that grant program, but that's the kind of project that the grant program loves to fund. And so, certainly interested in hearing anyone, who would like to see additional kind of side paths like that, or, additional connections. Obviously, that sort of connects into the area of like the schools and Memorial Park and sort of the library, Council on Aging area. But also, Sally, to your point, some of those sort of low stress streets, that's definitely key to the plan. And I think, we in sort of transportation planning, we, think of, kind of roads in terms of that sort of speed and traffic volume, and that informs the bicycle level of traffic stress. And so, yeah, certainly some of those, side streets are definitely, lower traffic, lower speeds, and make for great connections, that aren't as costly for sure. So thank you so much for your feedback, and certainly happy to hear any additional comments you have.
Yeah, so speaking of 106, as you go past Flint Farm, it's a major highway, 50 miles an hour. I was appalled when they put that speed limit out there because people can't cross the street from going from one neighborhood to another. I don't know what can be done there.
So, as far as the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, that is on 106 in the vicinity of Flint Farm, you're saying?
Yeah, past that. Yeah, as you're on your
Okay.
way to Easton.
Okay. And, yeah, I'm trying.
I
Go
called the
ahead.
state as complaining about it because it really impedes people's freedom to cross the street if they're up for a jog. There's a beautiful sidewalk on one side of the street. How do you get there from there? And I called the town, and it was like nobody wanted to own up. So that would be
Yeah,
something that should be in this report.
absolutely. Yeah. Speed management is definitely kind of an evolving area of concern for folks. There's actually a website that might be helpful for you, Sally, is mass.gov forward slash safe dash speeds. We can put that in the chat as well. But that's basically a website that the state put out to help folks understand speed limits and how they are set, and as well as kind of a concept called traffic calming, which is essentially sort of looking at ways to reduce speeding in neighborhoods to improve kind of safety for residents. And so there's a variety of different strategies that the towns and cities can deploy. Folks are probably familiar with things like a raised crosswalk, or in past there was speed bumps and now there's speed humps, and a variety of things. Other things similar to that, sort of in the realm of speed management, is something called a speed feedback sign. And so that's sort of, as a car is driving, it's got the posted speed limit, and then right below it, sort of the digital readout of what your speed is, which is, sort of a helpful feedback for folks, especially in areas like schools and things like that. So there's a lot of great resources there that folks can look at, and we will certainly be looking at speeds in Mansfield, and as it relates to the bicycle pedestrian network, especially, any sort of recommendations around that. So thank you, Sally.
You're welcome. Just one last question. So you're looking for new members, but how often will you be meeting?
We are meeting roughly once a month, and that is sort of generally what the committee is meeting so far. We're sort of SRPEDD staff are sort of developing the plan. It's really just the steering committee that helps to sort of weigh in and guide sort of some of the plans, goals and specific giving us, us planners that are not residents, a better sense on the lay of the land in Mansfield and who to talk to and what places to go, things like that. Right. I'm going to allow Timothy, I'm going to allow you to talk as well.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I would like to mention that there is a need for sidewalks on Branch Street. Sidewalks run from east up to Jake's Way, and it would help to have sidewalks extended from Jake's Way to Ware Street. Also, sidewalks would be helpful for safety from on Fruit Street by the airport, from Hall Street on Fruit Street all the way to the Norton line. And that almost gets you down to the bike path extension that has opened up into Norton. So extend the sidewalks on Branch Street and also on Fruit Street because people are coming off the bike path and at Fruit Street, and it would be, and that's a safety issue because you got cars and pedestrians and bicyclists coming onto Fruit and crossing Fruit Street by the airport, and there's no shoulder at all for pedestrians and bicyclists and runners on Fruit Street. Just want to share that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Timothy. And that's something that we've definitely observed, prior to the extension to Norton, Fruit Street was the trailhead. And so, SRPEDD, we would, pretty regularly go out to check it out, but definitely noticed people walking in along Fruit Street. And I believe that sort of concept that you're describing, sidewalks along Fruit Street, I believe that is included in the town's complete streets prioritization plan that was put forth in, I believe, 2017. A lot of times there's a long list of projects that towns have as far as complete streets and potential projects for grant funding, and so I know that's on there. But Timothy, I'm curious if obviously the airport is close by there. I believe there's a restaurant at the airport. I'm curious if you think that a sidewalk connection to the airport would be something useful for the community.
Yeah, yes, because it's not far off of the bike path. And if people knew that the restaurant was there, maybe they could put a sign at the parking lot at the bike path at Fruit Street, and that might get more people to go to that restaurant. It's very good. Been there a couple of times myself, and that can get people off the bike path, and then also people from Hall Street, Fruit Street, and South Main Street could walk there as well. It would be a safe walk.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, about getting, people to access the restaurant at the airport, because, that's one thing that, is maybe a little bit difficult to quantify, but sort of the economic impact for the town as it relates to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and how can we better quantify the benefits of the rail trail for the town, and specifically, for example, the downtown, how can traffic along the rail trail, or increased traffic along the rail trail, translate to, dollars and cents, for, business owners downtown, for, especially for like we were talking about the restaurants and things like that, because there is some good research out there about restaurants being particularly good beneficiaries of bicycle and pedestrian traffic. I'll just say just real quick before we move on and listen to other folks. I was in the town of Wareham a year or two ago, and we were at a public hearing for a bike path near Wareham Village, and the gentleman who owns the restaurant right there on the water says that the Pan Mass Challenge day that, obviously the Pan Mass Challenge riders ride through town is his best day of the year because so many folks stop and get lunch at his restaurant on, Pan Mass Challenge Day. So I think it's, a kind of a good sort of small view into how improved bicycle and pedestrian traffic can really benefit businesses in Mansfield, and how it can be sort of an economic development driver as well. All right, let's see. So, one of Tom's comments in the Q&A is, will the reconstruction of School Street and or Chauncey Street include sharrows or dedicated right-of-way bike paths? So I can share what I'm aware of as far as those two projects. So School Street, from 140 or roughly 140 to Copeland Drive. That I believe will have bike lanes that are added as part of that project. There's an existing kind of sidewalk in poor shape on the east side of that road. And so they're completely reconstructing the sidewalk and adding bike lanes on the side of that. I believe there'll be 5 foot wide bike lanes on both sides. For Chauncey Street, I believe that project, which is again Chauncey Street from 140 to Copeland. I'm fairly certain that that project has bi-directional side path on the side, so it's an 8 foot wide facility, which is enough to have bi-directional travel for pedestrians and cyclists. So Tom, to answer your question, both those projects, School Street and Chauncey Street, both include bicycle infrastructure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one additional Q&A from Sally. We live on Lawndale Road and find that going through the high school grounds through the back bay to downtown is helpful. Yeah, I think that's helpful to know. Thank you, Sally, for sharing that. We I think the sort of area behind the high school, middle school, and sort of sandwich between the library and Council on Aging, it's certainly seems like it's a well-utilized space, obviously with a playground and athletic fields. And yeah, it's a great kind of example of a green space that serves multiple functions. It's obviously, useful for the athletic fields and the playground, but it also provides that connectivity, a safe walking, biking connectivity for folks in the area. And we got another comment here from Sally. Restroom facilities at Harry Chase Park and other local parks would be really helpful. Yeah, it's a good comment, Sally. One of the things about pedestrian planning or bicycle and pedestrian planning is, restroom facilities is just like rest stops for vehicles, restroom facilities for bicycle and pedestrian is also important. And we often, hear comments from folks that have, an existing bike path in their community and when they're thinking about ways that they want to enhance the existing, infrastructure at their bike path or shared use path, um, bathrooms is often one of those things that is needed. And certainly for folks that are traveling, a distance to go to a bike path in a different area knowing where the restrooms are, and it's very important information to know. I will say I was in downtown Mansfield on Tuesday of this week. And there was a gentleman from Dighton, that my hometown actually. A gentleman from Dighton he drove to the trailhead in Norton and rode all the way up from Norton into Mansfield, and we just happened to cross paths in downtown Mansfield, and we spoke, basically briefly about, where he was from, where he was riding to, and you have to assume, with someone who's coming to a community like that, he might not be familiar with the town itself, and knowing where the restrooms are is one important thing, and it kind of emphasizes the need overall for wayfinding signage. So sort of improving folks' understanding of where the different landmarks are that they may want to go to. So good comment. Thank you, Sally. Another comment was, are you planning bike racks downtown? So, bike racks is certainly something to think about. We are hopeful to do some mapping of some of the existing bike racks in Mansfield. If you are listening on the call now and you have some ideas as far as where additional bike racks would be helpful, we would love to hear that information. Um, you know, it's um, it's one of those things where we're going to be looking to map publicly accessible bike racks. So not necessarily bike racks that are sort of reserved for an individual property, but more so bike racks that are available for public use. So things like bike rack in front of town hall and bike rack at local park or school or things like that. So we're certainly looking for looking to map bike rack locations, and we're also interested in areas where there is an existing bike rack, but it might not be the preferred kind of bike rack. There's been a lot of bike racks installed that are not necessarily super functional for folks who want to be able to lock their bike up on its frame, and certain bike racks only really allow the front wheel of the bike to be attached to it, and so that's not necessarily preferable for someone who has a bike that's worth hundreds or thousands of dollars and certainly does not want that bike to be taken away. And so making sure that there's bike racks in convenient locations for folks, but also the right type of bike rack. So great comment as well. Thank you, Sally. An additional comment here from Timothy. Not a question, but a comment. A bike path slash lane through the center of town would help bikers access restaurants. The East Bay Bike Path in Rhode Island enables access to restaurants in Barrington, Warren, and Bristol. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed. And then Sally's final Q&A. Good question about sidewalks, South Street to 142. So South Street to Route 140 sidewalk gap. Sally, if you have anything to share in addition to that, I'm actually not. I'm not familiar with where South Street is, so I might have to look at a map after this meeting. But appreciate the comment, and we'll certainly note it. Thank you. School Street to 140. Got it. Yes, thank you. Barbara, I just elevated you, so please feel free to share your comment.
Yeah, I do a lot of biking now with the season turning nice and whatnot. Most of it's on streets, but I have done some bike path rides as well. And when you talk of restrooms and bike racks and whatnot, I know that I've seen bike bike kind of like bike utility units that provide air. It provides some of the equipment that one might need if they have a flat tire, and it's all connected in one unit. So if you're looking at, and I can certainly get pictures of that and send it off to the group. If you're looking at, people taking the bike trails and leaving it to go to a restaurant or to a restroom, they also have the facilities of pumping up your air in the tire as well.
Yeah, Barbara, that's a great point. Those are called bike fix-it stations.
Is that what it is? Okay.
There might be a couple different names, bike repair station, bike fix-it station, but yeah, those are great. They're pretty inexpensive and certainly very useful for some folks. Barbara, I'm curious if you can think of any specific areas in town that might benefit from that kind of station.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the airport, for when that's my first, you can kind of walk to the restaurant.
Mhm.
Or if you're looking, obviously the one in Mansfield is extending out to Norton, at the end there is there a need for it there as well? So I'm just, the ones that I've been on, I was out in Chelmsford and noticed it way out in the Chelmsford area, on one of the bike trails out there. But as far as for Mansfield goes, I'm thinking behind Jimmy's, um, at the intersection of Fruit Street, where the bike path continues on to Norton, and then possibly at the end there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sally and Tom have chimed in the Q&A. Sally says they have one at Borderland, I believe Borderland State Park Visitor Center. A lot of people go to Borderland and Maple Street. Maple Street is too narrow.
Yeah, it is. And when you say scenic area, I was just looking at it, and there are a lot of regulations and restrictions. But what about Elm Street, Old Elm Street, and William Street? I was driving on William Street the other day, and there's no sidewalks and there was a runner along the area there as well.
Yeah, yes, certainly interested in you know, hearing thoughts and comments from folks in West Mansfield about that area. In our steering committee earlier this week, it was discussed that there was previously a pedestrian underpass under the railroad tracks from basically connecting into the 1829 country store and then across, which is interesting. It's sort of a piece of infrastructure that may have been forgotten to time, but those are the sort of things that are useful and why we love hearing, from folks in the community because certain things like that just come up. But yeah, certainly as far as West Mansfield goes, certainly interested in additional comments as far as sidewalk connections and ways to get to and from places people want to go. I think West Street and School Street, continuously come up as, obviously priority roads and for folks in West Mansfield to get to the center of town. So thank you for that
Also the
those
Mansfield
additional.
Crossing as well. Um, and that's
Yep.
probably the only area of West Mansfield that I do try to bike to. And that's where that's why I cross at West Street, cut through the industrial park, because crossing 140 at School Street is too dangerous. And as you talked about, sort of unlocking access to commercial areas for retail and for restaurants, for pedestrians and bicyclists, making sure that we have safe access to Mansfield Crossing would certainly help improve the economic activity in that area.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. And duly noted on your comment. The lot behind Jimmy's Pub on the rail trail with a bike rack would be a great location for a bike repair station. Yeah, I think yeah, that's sort of in that sort of Harry Chase Park area, which it's already got a bunch of amenities there. A great kind of canopy and benches, and some interesting sort of historical maps and things like that. So I think a bike repair station would be a great complement to that. So
Great.
that's a
Thank
great feedback. Thank you. And Tom, you said I may be an adventurous biker, but I still won't bike through most of West Mansfield. Too dangerous. Yeah. Now, Tom, I guess, just asking about that when you say too dangerous, I'm assuming you're referring to cars going too fast. Is
No,
that the primary sort of risk you're
no,
discussing?
I'm not. It's not so much cars and speed. It's more visibility of me as a bicyclist, even with active lights in the front and the back. Things like West Street, right? Even unlike Maple Street, where we talked about, it's a scenic road, so maybe that's why there's no shoulder. West Street, there's not only is no shoulder, but certainly where the Greek Orthodox church is, the curves are too tight. So I'm not so much worried about other vehicles in their speed. It's more vehicles in their ability to see me as a bicyclist.
Got it. Yeah.
It's the
That
same problem that the last person speaking talked about on places like Old Elm and Williams, where there's kind of some tight curves, narrow roads, and so just makes visibility tougher as both a pedestrian, a jogger, a runner, bicyclist, what have you. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's too bad that the cows that decided where those roads would go didn't have, forethought about cyclists in the future, 100, 200, 300 years in the future. So, that's a common challenge with, rural roadways is they present some serious visibility issues, especially with areas where there's vegetation like right up to the edge of the road. So that's kind of unrelated going from biking to pedestrian, but certainly curious thoughts on vegetation management and areas in Mansfield that someone could walk down the shoulder on a road, but it it kind of has vegetation that's overgrown and doesn't enable walking on the shoulder, or just common vegetation issues with intersections. And I think we've certainly heard comments from not just bicycle and pedestrian folks, but just people generally driving through town, and talking about vegetation issues where there might be sight line issues for folks turning or something like that. So we're also obviously um, interested in that as well, particularly for folks who want to get out and walk on road shoulders. Barbara, I'll let you go first if you want to chime in. Or your hand might still be raised. I'm not sure.
If not, I'll happily go. I had my hand
Yeah,
raised
go
again.
ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
One of the things I do every spring is I start traveling with a pair of clippers in my pannier bag, because Maple Street between Franklin and oh geez, what is it? North Oakland Street, sorry. That the scenic road. The vegetation overgrows not just the shoulder but onto the road as well. Especially, it's interesting as you get down towards the industrial park, where there's a lot of folks who during lunch will go out for a walk, and they're pushed onto the road as well. So the one area where vegetation management might be helpful and maybe is more of a challenge because it's a part of the town conservation area is that area where obviously tight curves, no shoulders, any little bit of vegetation encroachment really creates a hazard.
Got it.
But
Thanks, Tom.
otherwise, I gotta say, Mansfield Electric does a great job of maintaining good sight lines and keeping trees away from electric lines. That helps with like sight lines and many other intersections.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, Mansfield's lucky to have a municipal utility for sure. Um, Well, I think, folks, if you've been sitting on the call and waiting to chime in, now is the time. We're going to be wrapping this thing up soon, but would love to hear any final comments anyone has, who wants to chime in or post something in the Q&A. But yeah, so far, really, really great discussion and comments so far. So thank you all so much for chiming in and contributing. All right, folks. Well, I'll give you one last moment if you want to write down our contact information here. Again, serpid.org/Mansfield bike ped plan, and you can get in touch with us or submit a comment. Um, and we will be around for the next year or so, year and a half, continuing to hear your comments and hopefully developing a bicycle pedestrian network plan that meets your needs, and improves connectivity and safety across the community. So, with that, I think we're gonna close out the meeting for the night, and thank you all so much for participating and all the thoughtful feedback. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your night.